Shakespeare is hard to understand. It just is. So do not worry if you feel a little bit lost in the story, a little bit unsure about what you should be picking out for points and what quotes you should look at. This is what I'm going to go through in this video. Over a series of 5 videos, I'm going to go into each act of Macbeth, scene by scene, picking out all the important parts of the scene that you need to understand, quotes that you need to know, and potentially quotes that you should probably be looking to learn as well in order to use them in your essays. I toured California when I was younger doing Macbeth, so I know it pretty well. I would say almost off by heart. So don't worry, I will talk you through it and I will definitely make sure that you fully understand it by the time you get through to the end of all of the videos.
I got you, homie.
If you are new to the channel, thank you so much for checking it out. If you do find something useful in the video, please do consider subscribing, leaving a like on the video. And if you do have any further questions as well, feel free to leave them down in the comments section and I will definitely get back to you. But that said, let's crack on. Act 1, the summary. Okay, so right at the beginning, scene 1, we meet these 3 witches. And think about that. It's kind of interesting. The play is called Macbeth, and yet scene 1, we don't get Macbeth. Think of the way Shakespeare structured that. Instead, we meet these kind of weird, creepy witches, which kind of really raises the mystery in the story. And it definitely is going to be something to be quite striking for the audience, thinking like, witches, witchcraft, the supernatural, what's going to happen? Makes it kind of spooky, which is kind of interesting. And they make reference to a battle. And again, we don't know what this battle is. We don't know what's going on. Again, enticing the reader or the audience to really continue on. They do, however, mention the name Macbeth. They say, there to meet with Macbeth. And that really highlights him as their target. And it's kind of interesting that we hear about Macbeth before we meet the actual character of Macbeth. Again, like raising the mystery, the aura around this character. It's quite smart by Shakespeare. We know that they're quite powerful. And it's suggested that they can control the weather. They say, when shall we 3 meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? So think about those types of weather as well. Thunder, lightning, rain. These are kind of dark, very miserable sort of forms of weather. Again, raises the spookiness of these characters. And they end with quite an interesting sort of like chant. They say, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. Notice they've got a little rhyming couplet at the end, which gives them a really kind of eerie quality and gives a lot of power to that chant. So scene 1, it's quite a short scene, but it's really all about setting up the mystery of the play, introducing the supernatural and making it feel a little bit spooky, a little bit eerie. And I think that actually is a really interesting way of starting the play. It kind of gets the reader or the audience really hooked right from the very beginning. Scene 2, we actually still don't meet Macbeth in scene 2. Scene 2 is all about meeting the king and hearing about Macbeth in a bit more detail and sort of what a great warrior he is. So it starts off with the captain who is talking to the king about the battle that's just been taking place, in which Macbeth and Banquo as well have been very heroic in their duties for the king. Macbeth is portrayed as heroic. He's described as valor's minion. Valor meaning fighting for right or fighting for good. And minion meaning he's almost like the slave of goodness. He's also described as quite a violent character. The Bloody Captain says that Macbeth's sword, it was described as his brandished steel, meaning his sword, which smoked with bloody execution. So already, right at the beginning of the play, it's kind of set up that he's quite a violent, brilliant fighter, and that he's like, his sword is so covered in blood from like chopping people up. I mean, it's like quite exciting as well, right at the beginning. Probably a little bit of hyperbole here from the captain. He says that Macbeth cuts the slave, meaning the rebel MacDonald, who's risen up, actually the Thane of Cawdor, who's risen up against Duncan. And that he was the slave, the rebel, unseamed him from the nave to the chaps. Some translations have it as the chops, knave to the chops. And it basically means from the navel, i.e. your belly button, all the way up to his sort of chin. Literally cut the guy in half. It's pretty hardcore. And fixed his head upon our battlements. So taken off the rebel's head and stuck it on a sort of wooden post outside of their castle. Because he's shown to be such a good soldier, i.e. fighting for the king, the audience are immediately on Macbeth's side, because remember, back in Shakespeare's time, the king was the most important person in the land. So if you were fighting for the king, if you were the king's soldier, that would have given you quite a lot of honour, a lot of respect. And the fact here that Macbeth is being set up as such a good fighter for the king is really going to put us on his side. Think of how interesting that is, because right at the very beginning, we're on Macbeth's side. We think, yeah, what a great warrior, fighting for the king. Excellent. Think about how we should view him later on as a full 180-degree turn. We go from supporting him right at the beginning to really hating him at the end. Very clever from Shakespeare. The Thane of Cawdor, the title of the Thane of Cawdor is given to Macbeth. Duncan says, with his former title, greet Macbeth, i.e. now that the rebel is dead, the old Thane of Cawdor, take his title, the Thane of Cawdor, and give it to Macbeth. What does it mean to be a Thane? We don't really have these terms anymore. We sort of do, because we have like lords or earls or dukes. And those are the English terms for someone who owns land and is a part of the aristocracy or the nobility. In Scotland, it was called the Thanes. So the Thane of Cawdor. What would it mean? Well, it would mean having land. And with that land would come soldiers, because the people who work for you on the land, who you rent the land out to, would also be your soldiers. And you'd also get a castle. You would also be a part of the nobility, as I mentioned just then, and would therefore be closer to the king. You would have much more right to speak to the king. You'd probably know the king, actually, if you were a lord or a thane. Now, Macbeth's already the Thane of Glamis. So receiving Cawdor's title means he is now very powerful, because he's got 2 castles, maybe even more, because there might be multiple castles on his land, his like county that he now owns. So Macbeth is doing very, very well. He's probably not just incredibly powerful, but very, very wealthy. So it's a pretty good day for Macbeth fighting in this battle. And that's the end of scene 2. Duncan basically sends away the captain and says, right, go treat him for his wounds. And yeah, that's the end of that scene. Scene 3. The witches make a potion using animal and human flesh. So kind of, again, like every time we see them, they're going to get spookier and spookier, and also more and more powerful. By the time we get into Act 3, they're like conjuring stuff for Macbeth to see. So their power is going to increase, and also we're going to be more and more disgusted by them as we go on. Here we finally meet Macbeth and Banquo, actually, and they meet the witches. They greet Macbeth by saying, "Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor," and they also say to him, "Thou shalt be king hereafter." Now, we've got a little bit of dramatic irony there, because we know something that the character doesn't. We already know that Duncan has announced that Macbeth will be the Thane of Cawdor, but he doesn't know that. So that then sets up that the witches are about to tell Macbeth that he is to be Thane of Cawdor. He's obviously shocked by it, freaked out, kind of doesn't believe it. But we know it's true. We actually know that that part of the prophecy is already going to become true. And Macbeth is confused and shocked. He says, the Thane of Cawdor lives. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? Bit of a metaphor there, saying, why are you giving me a title that already belongs or exists for someone else? Just like taking a piece of clothing that someone else owns or wears. Banquo asks for a prophecy for himself. He says, speak then to me. I wouldn't look too much into that. I think Banquo's attitude to the witches is probably a bit like of a joke. I think both of them, like, they sort of, they say that the witches look like bearded women and the weird sisters, they call them. So it's not like they necessarily take them seriously until the first prophecy comes true of Macbeth becoming the Thane of Cawdor at the end of this scene. So the fact that Banquo just asked for a prophecy, he's just kind of like, yeah, well, give one to me then. I want a prophecy from these weird people. And what do they say to him? They say that his children, Banquo's children, will be kings. They say, thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. So basically, you won't be a king, but your sons will be kings. That's going to be very important later on. And then the witches vanish, and Macbeth and Banquo joke about the prophecies. They think they're just completely nuts, and who were these weird people? What a freaky experience. And then suddenly Ross and Angus arrive. You don't really need to know a huge amount about Ross and Angus. They're just other Thanes, and generally we'll meet a few sort of Thanes like Lennox as well. Some of them, when it all kicks off and Macbeth takes the throne, some of them go on Malcolm's side, some of them stay on Macbeth's side. You don't need to know a massive amount about them. They basically just deliver messages and update the audience of like what's going on at various points in the play. But anyway, they deliver the news that he bade me from him, talking about Duncan, call thee, i.e. you, Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor. Now, of course, Macbeth is shocked, and Banquo warns him, very important warning, by saying that the instruments of darkness, i.e. the witches, tell us truths to betray us in deepest consequence. So basically warning Macbeth and saying, okay, these guys are evil, they are dark, they're the instruments of darkness. They will betray us. They will tell us truths, things that will happen, only in order to betray us later on down the line, which we will come back to when we look at Act 5. Macbeth is shocked. We've done that one. Macbeth is perhaps a little bit excited, but also worried by the idea of being king. He says, why does it make my seated heart knock at my ribs? Basically, as in, think of this metaphor as like, why is my heart pounding against my chest? My seated heart knocking at my ribs. Quite interesting imagery there. Good metaphor to talk about. Very important though. He says, if chance will have me king, why chance may crown me. And a little thing I haven't mentioned on the summary there is that those two quotes are said as an aside. What is an aside? Aside's a really good form technique of Shakespearean writing. It is a moment where the character speaks to the audience while other characters are on stage who don't hear what that character says to the audience. So it's a moment of intimacy between the character and the audience. Think about what the effect on the reader is there. It really does build the relationship between character and audience member. So it's different from a soliloquy, because a soliloquy is where the character is alone on stage speaking to the audience. The aside is slightly different because there are characters on stage. They just don't hear what the character says. It's almost like time freezes and the character has this moment of intimacy with the audience. Scene 4. Duncan is presented as a trusting character, as he says the man who betrayed him was, or says, he was a man in whom I built an absolute trust. Duncan feels that it is impossible to fully thank Macbeth and Banquo for their efforts on the battlefield, and he's quite fatherly towards Banquo. He says, let me hold thee to my heart. Now think about that. Think about how Duncan is presented at the beginning of Macbeth. Someone who is almost really saddened and disappointed that he was betrayed by the rebel MacDonald at the beginning in scene 2, the old Thane of Cawdor. He's really sad about that. He says, I really trusted this guy. I can't believe he would do this to me. And then when Macbeth and Banquo rock up, you know, he wants to literally like hug Banquo. He's really presented as a very, very good king. Again, think about that. Why Shakespeare does that. It makes his death all the more shocking when Macbeth decides to kill who is a very innocent king, really, there's not a single moment in Macbeth where King Duncan is shown to be a bad person. In fact, it's the opposite. He's shown to be a very good person. So why does Shakespeare do that? In order for us to hate Macbeth even more when he eventually does kill Duncan in a little bit. Duncan announces that Malcolm, who is his son, Duncan's son, will be heir to the throne. He calls him the Prince of Cumberland. That's really important because think about that prophecy that the witches gave Macbeth. Thou shalt be king hereafter. Well, that's going to make Macbeth, it's going to make it harder for him to become king because there is now a heir to the throne, which basically means if Duncan was to die in his sleep, we know who the next king of Scotland's going to be. It's going to be his son, Malcolm, because Duncan has declared that. He's called the Prince of Cumberland. Malcolm means he's the heir to the throne. So that makes it a little bit harder for Macbeth. So Macbeth has an aside, again, a moment talking just to the audience where he admits to having thoughts about killing the king. This is literally like the king is on stage with Macbeth and Macbeth has an aside. Obviously, king isn't hearing it. And he says to the audience, stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. Fantastic quote to analyze this. Definitely one to learn, have in your head ready for exams because loads of lovely techniques in there you can talk about. There's a metaphor, there's also alliteration as well, and also symbolism. So let me talk through each one of those. You've got a metaphor because stars can't hide their fires. But what he's basically saying is the stars represent heaven, i.e. God. So he's saying heaven or God, do not see my thoughts, my black and deep desires. Black symbolizing death, devil, evil, things like that. And then you've got the alliteration of deep desires as well. Now, that's quite interesting. That's the first time we actually hear Macbeth say that he desires to be king, that the witches have now put this into his mind and he's now actively thinking about being king. And then it ends with Duncan inviting himself to Macbeth's castle. Now, on that note about Macbeth taking what the witches say and developing this desire. I love having this debate with students, this particular one. If Macbeth never met the witches, do you think he would have gone on to kill the king? Do me a favour, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think to that question. If he had never met the witches, would he have killed the king? Because let's think about it. If he doesn't meet the witches, he never thinks about being king. He would never write a letter to Lady Macbeth, which we're about to read in a moment, where he talks about the witches saying he's going to be king. Now, if Lady Macbeth doesn't think he's going to be king, Lady Macbeth's not going to be like telling him to kill Duncan. Would Macbeth ever have done the things that he had done? Some people think, yes, he probably would have done it anyway. He was hungry for power. Some people kind of agree with me, actually, which is I think everything is down to the witches. Without the witches being involved, Macbeth never kills the king. But let me know in the comments down below what you think. Okay, scene 5. We meet Lady Macbeth. She reads a letter from Macbeth about the prophecy and the witches. So Macbeth writes her a letter and basically just tells her everything about what has happened with the witches and the fact what the prophecies say and the fact that he's just been named Thane of Cawdor. She seems very excited by the idea of being queen. A messenger rocks up and announces that the king and Macbeth are on their way. Lady Macbeth presents more like a witch. She calls upon spirits to unsex her, i.e. take away her femininity, make her more like a man. And importantly, fill her with direst cruelty. So direst meaning the worst, and cruelty obviously meaning like evilness. So she really does present as someone involved in the supernatural. I mean, calling upon the spirits, basically like calling upon the devil or evil to take away her womanliness is so dark. And this is the first time we meet her. Scene 5. Her first scene. Shakespeare is already wants us to be fully on board with the idea that Lady Macbeth is an evil person. She goes even further. She says, "Stop up the passage and access to remorse. Make thick my blood," she says, which basically means stop me feeling any guilt for what I am about to do. So dark. She also says she wants to be covered in the dunnest smoke of hell, which basically means dunnest means the darkest smoke of hell. I mean, you can't get like any other example of how Lady Macbeth is being presented as evil. I mean, she literally wants to become part of hell. So dark. Macbeth enters, and Lady Macbeth says that they should kill Duncan tonight. Oh, never shall sun that morrow see. Basically, Lady Macbeth's fully on board with it. She's like, right, cool. He's coming to the castle. We're going to kill him. And to be fair, Macbeth is pretty on board with that as well. And she starts to coach Macbeth on how to get away with the murder. One of the all-time great quotes from Macbeth coming up. You've got to know this one for your exams. She says, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." If you've watched my video on, which I'll put up on the screen up here now, on choosing good literature quotes, I actually do some analysis on that quote in that video as an example. So you've got look like the innocent flower. So bit of a simile there, trying to get him to compare himself to an innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath it. So you've got the metaphor and symbolism of the serpent, meaning the devil, from the Bible, Garden of Eden. So it's a really powerful quote to analyze. There's so much you can say about it, but definitely do check that video that was just up there, and have a look at how you can analyze literature quotes. There's loads of good information in there. And lastly, Lady Macbeth is in complete control. The scene ends. The final words of this scene are Lady Macbeth saying, "Leave all the rest to me." Now, what's weird about that is that we're in Shakespearean times here. This play is written in 1606. And 1606 is not a time for women to be kind of like giving orders to men. It's just the way it was back then. Like, men were in control. Women didn't have rights. Women couldn't vote. Women couldn't choose who they married. There was no voting, really, I suppose. So it's kind of interesting for Shakespeare to present Lady Macbeth right away. Remember, it's the first scene we've seen her, scene 5 of Act 1. And she's like in charge. Super weird. I definitely think the audience would have been quite uncomfortable with that. Remember, Macbeth's supposed to be this great warrior, and here you've got his wife telling him, "I'm in charge." Kind of an interesting choice from Shakespeare. Scene 6, super short. Really, really short. Literally, Duncan just arrives at Macbeth's castle. Lady Macbeth greets them. And Duncan again says how much he cares for Macbeth. He says, "Conduct me to mine host. We love him highly." We, meaning the royal we. The king speaks about himself in almost like third person. Super weird, but one of those things. Again, remember what I said earlier on about Shakespeare presenting Duncan as this very virtuous, perfect kind of character. Here he is. "I love Macbeth. I've come to Macbeth's castle. My good thane, Macbeth." What do we know is going to happen? We know someone's about to get stabbed in his sleep. Pretty dark. So, yeah, I think we're definitely already here at the end of Act 1. We're not supposed to be on Macbeth's side straight away. Scene 7. This is a really pivotal scene. If you are not 100% sure about anything in scene 7, you should reread it. I'm going to go through it now and give you as much information as I can. It's really important because at the beginning of scene 7, Macbeth changes his mind and decides, actually, we should not kill the king. Lady Macbeth enters, and Macbeth says, we shall proceed no further in this business. And Lady Macbeth goes all out attack mode on him, calls his manhood into question. And by the end of scene 7, Macbeth agrees that they should kill the king. So it's a really important scene for the weakness of Macbeth. Although originally in the beginning of this scene 7, he shows some strength by saying, actually, no, it's only my ambition that is telling me to kill the king. We're not going to do it. But his weakness comes from Lady Macbeth's strength through the scene. Anyway, from the top, Macbeth in a soliloquy. Remember what a soliloquy is? Where you've got a character on stage by themselves speaking to the audience. No one else is on stage. He considers the consequences of killing the king. He realizes that he still has judgment here and can therefore change his mind. And he does go on to change his mind. He says that a murderer would also end up being murdered. He says, we but teach bloody instructions, have them return to plague the inventor. So basically, if you determine that someone should be murdered, that will come back to then murder you. Macbeth recognizes that he shouldn't kill King Duncan because, he says, as his host, he should, against his murderers, shut the door, not bear the knife himself. True. Generally, like, if you've got someone staying at your house, you should probably defend them and protect them rather than actually go on and kill them. Duncan is again presented as innocent. And now also we get this idea of him being quite holy. Some fantastic quotes to analyse in this monologue from Macbeth. Macbeth says that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. Fantastic quote. Definitely put it in your list of quotes to learn. What does it mean? Virtues. Virtues are the good qualities that you have. So he says Duncan's virtues will plead like angels. Great simile. Angels being from God, holiness, goodness up there. His virtues will shout out, plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, great alliteration, meaning shout louder than anything in the world against the deep damnation. Damnation meaning going to hell, of his taking off means his murder. So basically, if we break that down, Duncan's virtues are so holy and important that by him being murdered, that the whole world will be kind of up in arms against his taking off. My cat is meowing behind the door, if you're wondering what that noise is. She wants some chicken. I'll give her some in a minute. So yeah, we've got some really nice alliteration in this quote. We've got this religious imagery of Duncan's holiness, which makes it all the worse, of course, when Macbeth then goes on to change his mind again in this scene. I'm actually missing a few notes on this, so I'll just run through it off the top of my head. Lady Macbeth enters. Macbeth says, we shall proceed no further in this business. She says to him, was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Basically, the hope of being king. Drunk meaning, was it almost like frivolous or silly? Were you just being silly when you came up with this idea of being king? And she says, if you were a man, then you would do it. Then you durst do it. So basically saying, you're not a man if you don't do it. And of course, think of it again. Remember, 1606, the man is supposed to be powerful, dominant. And here, Lady Macbeth is saying, you're just going to be nothing. You're not even going to be a man if you don't do it. And she goes even further than that. She says that, had I so sworn to do it as you have sworn to kill the king. She said, I know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. Quite an important moment there, because what she's saying is, I have had a child. I know how loving it is to have a child, to love the babe that milks me, as she's feeding this child. I would, while he was smiling in my face, plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done. Think of how dark that is. She acknowledges that she's had a child, which we could probably assume means she's had a child with Macbeth, because generally back in those days, you would have had to be married. You can't have a child out of wedlock. So you must have been married, and generally women were only ever married once, generally. So it really does indicate that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have even had a child. But of course, we never see or hear about this child again in the play. Probably obviously indicates that the child has not survived, which would have been very common back in those times. So Lady Macbeth brings up the memory of their dead child and says that had I have gone back on my word like you have, I would bash the brains out of our child. Basically as dark as you can get. And think about this as well. Remember, women are supposed to be looking after the children at home. 1606, men are supposed to be out in the fields, working in the fields, or, doing whatever trade that they do. Women are supposed to be these loving, gentle souls who are too fragile to work, who would have looked after the children, who would have cooked, who would have done all these things. And then here's this woman being like, yeah, I would murder my child. I'd murder my child if I went back on my word, just like you're doing now. So she manipulates him to change his mind again. And after she says that, Macbeth says, I bend to your will. And yeah, I agree. We will do it. We will kill the king. Let's do it. Bring men, children only after that, he says. So really, really important moment here. I think Act 1, Scene 7 is probably one of my top scenes to know really quite well, quite confidently, and definitely there's loads of good quotes that you can learn from that scene. So it really shows the weakness of Macbeth, the strength of Lady Macbeth, and the goodness of Duncan. That's kind of the key parts of Scene 7. And that is it. That is the end of Act 1. 7 scenes. Really important act because it sets up, we actually meet the majority of the characters in the play. The only characters we haven't met yet are, well, not really, is Macduff. He hasn't been introduced yet, but apart from that, plus Hecate, but we'll come to Hecate in a later act. Apart from that, we've met everyone, and Shakespeare has established who all of these characters are, who the characters we should be supporting are, who the characters we're beginning to not support are. So I hope you found that really useful. If you did, please do subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below if you think Macbeth would ever have killed Duncan without the witches. Do find the next video. I will put it up on the screen floating here. The next video will be for Act 2, and you'll also see Act 3 as well coming up. So do check out those videos because I'm going to be going through it as in-depth as I did here, and it will really help you understand the play. And you'll go back to school after watching these videos not having any concerns about Macbeth. You'll know it, you know all some good quotes, you're going to smash it. So thank you so much for watching the video. I'll catch you in the next one.